Okay, a couple weeks from the draft, but if it's Tuesday, it's Weird Browns news. So we are off with Greg Newsome's day. Cleveland Browns corner switched agents, and then almost simultaneously, multiple reports came out. One from Brad Stanbrook, who said that Greg Newsome was hoping to be traded. Then Adam Schefter came out and said that through Rosenhaus that that it was, he's just meeting and is very happy to be a Cleveland Brown and everything else. To which Greg Newsome immediately comes out on his own and then talks about how he's launching the softball game, which he is, and we can talk about that briefly. And then he has every intention of staying here and all of that. So, which then caused Brad Stanbrook to
backtrack.
Well, all right, go ahead.
You're tongue-tied.
Well, it's one of those things where, Brad, if that's what Brad heard, if somebody told him that, then just stay by what you reported. You don't need because if in 2 weeks it comes out that indeed Greg Newsome is, asking for a trade, then he was right. It was weird that Brad immediately folded. It just felt unnecessary to me. He can say,
well, look, I feel like that had to do with the fact that Greg Newsome quote tweeted him.
Sure.
Specifically, obviously, when you report on something. First of all, I find it very fascinating in this day and age with Twitter and social media in general. I feel like there's obviously this competition of who can get the news out quicker.
Oh, absolutely.
In a sense, that is the only focus of getting the news out there to be the first one to break the news, that maybe there isn't vetting that needs to happen, or there isn't thought into, okay, does this make sense? Do I really want to put this out there? And then obviously if an athlete gets a hold of it and then debunks it, then you look like an ass, pretty much.
In an era of epic firsting, which is how I think of all of this stuff, you got to be the first. It doesn't matter if it's right. Just get it out there first. But
feels like this was a setup.
Maybe, who knows? Maybe the Browns are escorting somebody out and
I was gonna say I don't know, there's a mole. There is a mole, and this may have done it. Also, if that's his source, maybe his source isn't going to be happy that he's claiming that his source lied. I don't know.
And that's all the more reason.
Intricacies.
That's all the more reason to just say, look, this is what I was told. This is what my report, and then let it play out. And I get it from the standpoint he's a young guy. Brad is very young. So I think that's an element to this, and he doesn't want to burn these bridges, but I think he doesn't help himself in that regard. It's just my opinion. I don't think he helps himself by folding over so quickly, because he could be right. And then he's of course going to take credit for it if he does. So it looks weird to then, so anyway, I don't want to spend too much time with him, but there's a lot of angles to this. And I think this whole conversation is really interesting. With the goal of being extremely charitable, I want to look at this from a number of sides. I wrote an article on what I think this ultimately is and what this means, but let's make this real easy. Greg Newsome has 2 years left on his contract. And then if his fifth year option is picked up, it's 3 years. And yet he switched from Drew Rosenhaus, who was originally his agent, to Clutch Sports this past year, to then back to Drew Rosenhaus, despite the fact he's on the same contract he's had the whole time. Now, certainly part of that, and I assume part of the move to Clutch Sports was marketing, that part of what their sales pitch to him was, we can do more with you in terms of marketing opportunities. Looking at Lamar Jackson, that's probably a good idea for players to take advantage of those, since, he's still trying to help out Ken Francis in that crappy gym. Whereas Greg Newsome clearly has a lot of interest, and we've talked about him. I mean, of all the Browns players on this team, you can most quickly, Greg Newsome brands immediately come to mind, because he's so far out there. Crocs being the number one. He's such a big proponent of Crocs, but Greg Newsome in a lot of ways is very online for both right and wrong reasons. After all, we are allegedly in the midst of Greg Newsome won't be back on Twitter until May still. despite the fact he's been back on Twitter any number of times since declaring that. But we'll leave that there. So that could be part of it. But again, he's not getting a new contract. So why do you keep switching agents? And then, sort of to give people some sort of background on how this generally works. Drew Rosenhaus in particular, who I'm not a big fan of, he works on volume. So his thing is he signs 1 million clients and none of them pay him anything until they get a new contract. So if Drew Rosenhaus is your agent, he is incentivized to find a way to get you a new contract. And usually that tends to work itself out combatively in a lot of cases. It doesn't mean it has to, but if you're Drew Rosenhaus and Greg Newsome's your client and you're 3 years away from a new contract, how are you going to sort of find a way to make him more money? You're sort of stuck. Now, that same thing means that Drew Rosenhaus could sort of kick the tires on this thing real quick and go, nope, nothing's happening. Basically move on to any of his million other clients. And, Greg Newsome's not paying him for it anymore, but he's also not getting representation in that regard. So it's sort of troubling in that regard because Drew Rosenhaus's clientele has a horrific track record of players going broke because, unlike some other agencies, they suggest people to sort of help you out and, give you financial education and these things to help you try to make sure you don't go that route. The Browns, for example, have a woman come in. I assume she's still doing it, named Hillary Seiler. I actually did an interview with her and wrote an article with her talking about her process. And she goes into the facility and does real classes and tries to help them out as much as possible. And, a couple of times a year she goes. Right after the draft, she goes and tries to do this stuff. So in that sense, even if you have Drew Rosenhaus as your agent, if you're listening to Hillary, she's very smart and you're doing right by yourself on that end, you're sort of protecting yourself a little bit. So that part to me is good, but that's where it gets weird. Why switch agents if you're not trying to make something happen?
Yeah. You had texted me, Pete, earlier in the day and said, first of all, I just want to say I actually was up to speed on this one because there was all of the drama surrounding who was breaking the news and Greg Newsome debunking the rumor and all that stuff. So I actually was a little bit up to speed on this. And when you texted me, you had said it reminds you of the David Njoku situation. 100%. And that also was who he switched to from an agent standpoint, right? Was that the same? Was it the same exact scenario?
Yeah. Well, different. He wasn't with Clutch Sports, but yes, David Njoku gets drafted by the Browns, has the agent he hired initially, does his rookie contract. And then they get to, 2019 or 2020 and they sign Austin Hooper and David Njoku is sitting there going, oh, well, if he's done, they paid him, they paid Austin Hooper a lot of money.
Right.
And he's sitting there going, number 2 tight end, where's my financial future in that? So he requested a trade. He fires that agent. He hires Drew Rosenhaus. And to be clear, Njoku was never unhappy with the Browns. It was never a case of where he's sitting there going, well, I don't like it here. I don't want to be here and everything else. All he thought to himself was, it's the NFL. It's not for long. I don't know how long I'm going to be in the league. I want to get as much money as I can while I can, which everybody can relate to, even if whether you're in the NFL or not. If you are just person who is a average working person in this country, you can totally relate to that. I want to be paid what I think I'm worth. Everybody can sort of do that, but the nature of the beast is always, oh, he's demanding a trade. He must hate us, as if it's as if we did it.
Yeah, and it's usually taken very personally.
Which, as we've talked about with the whole Lamar Jackson thing, it becomes more personal because you don't have an agent and it's all you versus the team.
Yes.
Why it was helpful that he has Drew Rosenhaus, and Drew Rosenhaus is the Roger Goodell of agents. He is a tomato can that will take punches all day for his clients, which is why he's he's not afraid to be a villain.
Yeah.
As long as it's very clear that he's the agent when they get the deal done, which is why you get all those tweets like Schefter, Rappaport, or Garofalo, where it's always, so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so, and his agent Drew Rosenhaus. He always makes sure to get himself out. I will never forget Willis McGahee way back in the day coming out of the draft out of the University of Miami after Ohio State blew up his knee. And he was sitting next to him in every interview. And you got so sick of Drew Rosenhaus in that era. Drew Rosenhaus also famously at one point thought he had a big enough market share in the league where he was going to try conspire to have all of his clients allegedly hold out at once and hope he could muscle the league. No, it didn't work. Anyway, so Njoku goes, no, they brought in Austin Hooper. This must not be a great situation for me. I want to be able to play well, get myself in a position to earn that lucrative second contract. So he goes, okay, I'd like to be traded with a team I can do that. The Browns brought him in, and Andrew Berry and Andrew Berry in that case had already a pre-existing relationship with David Njoku, having been major reason he was drafted in the first place. Even when John Dorsey hated David Njoku, Andrew Berry came back and sort of talked a lot of things off the ledge. But he and Kevin Stefanski basically said, look, not only do we think you're a major part of this team, we believe in you and all this other stuff. As long as you're good, we have no problem paying for 2 tight ends, paying premium cash money. Now, in that particular situation, that didn't come up because Austin Hooper did not play well on his new contract, and they ultimately cut him in 2 years. David Njoku had an outstanding offseason. I credit a lot of it to him just growing up, because people forget that he was 20 when the Browns drafted him, and you saw some immaturity and stuff. He's an interesting dude. He's sort of out there in some ways, but he's a really smart guy. But like at different points in his career, he sort of took things very personally, and then you saw him sort of grow up. So even though he's sitting there requesting a trade, he busted his ass and worked really, really hard and made a huge jump from 2019 to 2020 and got way, way, way better. So ultimately, he did right by himself and said, look, my agent will handle this and we'll figure it out. Ultimately, they came to the decision that he's like, I'm good here. We can make this work. And then promptly fired Drew Rosenhaus, rehired the agent he had previously. And the old agent he had originally is the one who negotiated the contract extension he now has. So that's why, that's a good example of Drew Rosenhaus is basically a mercenary. But the thing that, sort of burned him is I don't know if Drew Rosenhaus made $1 off of David Njoku, because the new contract was never done by him and he never got any new money. So, that's, I guess, sort of the other angle of it. If you like this not paying Drew Rosenhaus money unless he gets you money, that if he screws it up or whatever, he can't do it, you don't have to pay him, theoretically. So yes, Greg Newsome could potentially find this is going to go nowhere, promptly fire Drew Rosenhaus again, and either go back to Clutch or somewhere else. Who knows? But yes, that's why those things are eerily similar. So I don't think Greg Newsome is stupid by any stretch. I think he by being too online, as with us all, when you're too online, there are times when he can make himself look, I don't want to say bad, because I don't really think it's an issue, but he sort of made
immature.
Whiny a little bit, maybe, with his like sort of not saying explicitly, I don't want to play in the slot, but making very clear through social media postings he doesn't want to really play in the slot and this whole thing.
But wait, my favorite part about the whole situation, though, was as part of him debunking the rumor was the fact that he was having a celebrity softball tournament. Like, yes. That was like, hey guys, I wouldn't request a trade because I'm hosting a celebrity softball tournament. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of like the thing. And great on him. I have criticized Jarvis Landry's contract at any number of stops along the way. But it's interesting that David Njoku has made a huge effort to sort of take the torch in terms of leadership and all that stuff. And like, if you read the article that Noah Weisskopf did, you saw how like a huge factor he was with Jakeem Grant, and how Njoku was there every day being like a super positive influence and like Jakeem Grant basically said in the interview that anytime he sees Njoku, he's like, he thanks him for everything he did. Like, and that's the stuff you're sitting there going, awesome. Like Jarvis Landry's legacy is carrying on. So Greg Newsome, for his part, is sort of carrying on the same thing. Softball game, just like Jarvis Landry was doing, exact same place it was. And like, cool. Like it's been a very successful event, and it's been a lot of fun for people who attend. It's been like just a positive thing. So good on him that he's continuing it. But that doesn't really enter into the conversation of, if you're not happy here, like that's not going to stop you. I think, we've seen players quickly move things as needed, but I get it. Like, and again, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt here. I do think he wants to be in Cleveland. I just think he wants to do it on the terms he thinks are best for him. And what I mean by that is the NFL is very strange when it comes to paying certain positions. Outside corners generally get paid more than slot corners. It's weird because slot corner is a really, really hard job to do. And like the best ones at it are super valuable. And yet the NFL is like, we're still not paying you for this. In fact, when slot corners get paid a lot of money, they're usually moved to some other position, despite the fact they were great at it. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is a fantastic example of this. He was the biggest prick / great slot corner for the New Orleans Saints for a couple of years. They ultimately trade him to the Eagles. He's so good at it, but then they have to move him back to deep safety. And then he goes to free agency. And he's complaining that the money's not great because so many people want him to be a slot safety. He signs with the Lions, who are probably going to make him a deep safety. He's not as good as at deep safety as he in the slot, but like the money demands that he not play in the slot. It's very backwards. So if you're Greg Newsome and you're sitting there one, I would describe him in his run defense in the slot as a conscientious objector. He didn't want teams to run on him, but he wasn't exactly the most enthusiastic about actually doing something to stop it. And that awful Saints game, and it's hard to hold too much against anyone who played in that game, but there were times when he almost like patted the running back on the ass as he ran by, and it just did not look good. But that's why it's a hard position, because you're asked to do a lot of those things, and he wasn't good at it. Now, he got better at the coverage aspects. But anyway, if you're looking at it and you're saying, you're Greg Newsome, you're entering your third year, and you're sitting there going, I don't want to be pigeonholed into this because it's going to hurt my future earning power. Now, my counter argument to that, and I assume the Browns would sort of make this as well, is whether we put you in the slot or not, teams have already, one, done the work on you in the draft, and two, have seen you play boundary corner for us, and they're going to evaluate it both. So if you go through the contract here and you get to free agency, they're going to look at you as potentially an outside corner anyway, because they're not going to just be like, oh, they played in the slot. Well, he has to play slot now. He becomes potentially an undervalued asset and could, get a nice contract there. And this past year, Greg Newsome's reps were split 50-50. Half were on the outside, half were on the inside. So I think he's overthinking things a little bit, but I understand, again, maximize your earning power. I get it. And to his credit, he's a very talented corner and could be great on the outside. So that is sort of where you get in this thing of like, I understand his position. I understand the team's position. Ultimately, like with David Njoku, the Browns are probably if Greg Newsome came to you right now and asked for a trade, what would you say?
Look, I see both sides of it, because it feels like the NFL is moving towards this. I don't want to say a player power necessarily, but it was really the one league where it felt like players didn't really have any say or control in where they went after they were drafted. And now we are hearing more and more from players themselves about what they want to do, where they want to go, them being unhappy or trying to take some of that power back. So I can understand, voicing your wants and needs. And if you feel like you are either underutilized or you want to get what you think you're worth, like, I understand that. I support that. Again, I've said on this show before, I very much am rooting for the players to succeed, both personally and professionally. And of course, it stinks when the players on your team that you root for, there are moments of doubt or maybe feeling like they don't want to be on the team for whatever reason. I think fans take it personally as well, and
Yes, absolutely.
specifically Browns fans, because we have unfortunately been through a lot of ups and downs, mostly downs, and a lot of rhetoric that the Cleveland Browns are a joke and no one ever takes them seriously. And they're obviously not a winning franchise. So when you hear things come out from players like this, it's just another like ding against the Browns. And that's tough, I think, for a lot of fans to swallow. I know Greg came out and essentially said, like, that's not happening. I will say there's probably some truth to what came out. There's probably some reason that this information was leaked. And if I remember correctly, there was a lot of things, and I don't know, you can tell me if this was valid or not valid, but I feel like originally a couple of months ago, there was conversations about Greg Newsome being maybe part of a trade package.
Well, certainly fans put him in trade packages.
Was that a fan thing, or was that like there was potentially some, because I felt like there were some reporters talking about, like, would he be part of the package?
I think,
or part of a package. I
think that part of it was more speculative, but I also think that the Browns are I don't think the Browns have a whole lot of guys outside of like Myles Garrett, Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, that they wouldn't take a phone call on.
That they aren't going to at least talk about.
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't be doing their jobs if they didn't. Like that's part of what this is. To your point, unless it's Deshaun Watson, Myles Garrett, they probably are willing to pick up the phone and listen. I mean that is literally Andrew Berry's job. Like, he has to listen. And I would actually be upset if he was being stubborn and not listening, because I do think he's very smart. And I also think, Pete, he warrants a lot of respect from his players. As much as we talk about Kevin Stefanski being calm and level-headed, Andrew Berry is literally the same way. Very calm, very level-headed, very even-keeled. In fact, I would say he seems like the type of person who doesn't have an ego, where if a player came directly to him and said, "Hey, I'm unhappy, I want to be traded." Clearly, we saw that kind of play out with David Njoku, the whole situation. Like, he wasn't like, "Oh, he doesn't want to play for us, like, go get lost." I feel like he is actually very receptive to feedback from players. And to me, that's also a really good sign, and someone that we would want to have within the organization to deal with things like this when they come up. And I also think that is a very good reason for players, free agents, draft players to also want to play for the Cleveland Browns, because you have a guy at the helm that manages and thinks through things that way.
Andrew Berry has a reputation of being a straight shooter. For better or worse, depending on your situation, you may not like what he has to say, but he's going to tell you what he thinks. And that has been good for him in dealing with players and agents, because they aren't guessing. They know where the Browns stand. And like I said, so, an example where a player wasn't thrilled with what the Browns offered is Anthony Walker Jr. Anthony Walker Jr., and I don't blame him. I'm amazed at how little he's getting. He's getting basically the veteran minimum this year. He signed. So, like, as unhappy as he may have been with that offer, and I don't blame him. He's here. And I think part of that is because
he knew what he was walking into, essentially.
Because it doesn't feel like he's playing games. Right. I think in that respect, Andrew Berry is running a, dare I say, adult organization.
Yes.
So that has been very helpful in terms of landing some of these bigger free agents. That is obviously was helpful with David Njoku's situation. And again, looking at this charitably from the standpoint of Greg Newsome and the story Mary Kay wrote, who has a very direct line to Drew Rosenhaus. Drew Rosenhaus's version of the events is to say that he was coming here anyway, because the Browns have a number of people in his clientele. Anthony Walker Jr. is one of them. But there are several others. And this was sort of a scheduled meeting that was going to take place, and that while the timing of the Greg Newsome news was sort of like, convenient for this, that really wasn't the focus of the conversation necessarily, and that he was just sort of like seeing how things are going, that was a very small part of it, and that he just wanted to sort of touch base on where they are with him. Possible, I suppose, but the timing is too convenient for me. Now, the way and what I wrote for this, my version of events was that you didn't, again, with potentially 3 years away from a new contract, this is not random. Now, I think Greg Newsome's thought process is, I think he's accurate with what he's saying. I think he's being honest when he says he wants to be in Cleveland. I think he's honest when he says he sees himself here for a long time. I think the change to Drew Rosenhaus represents a situation where if, they go into training camp this year and he doesn't beat out Martin Emerson for that job, then at least he's got potentially an advocate where if he then decides, I don't know, maybe we need to talk about this, then he can sort of sick the Drew Rosenhaus dog on the franchise and see what, if anything, comes up. Now, ultimately, this is why I say I don't think Greg Newsome is stupid. He knows what the answer is. The Browns are going to say no. The best case scenario for him is that they give Rosenhaus permission to sort of shop around for them to see if there's a team that's willing to give them a trade that maybe they'd be willing to sink their teeth into. I don't think there is one. And that's ultimately why I think, as I texted you, I think he was smart to sort of try to lower the temperature because he's able to sort of understand the situation. Holding out does not make sense for Greg Newsome. And he already said, at least through Adam Schefter, he plans to be there Monday, which is the start of the offseason program. Again, I think that's smart. I think at this point, he's done what he's going to do in terms of where we're at right now. And now, if you're Greg Newsome, and I hope he's talked to David Njoku. I'm guessing David Njoku has reached out to him, given that he went through the same situation, and basically gets the message that, look, you hired the agent will talk for you, but your best play is to compete. Your best play is to put yourself in the best possible position to succeed. If you don't beat out Martin Emerson, or you don't prove that you're a good player or a great player, as the case may be, then none of this matters. You can ask for trade, whatever, and then the Browns are trading you because they don't think you're very good. And that's not where you want to be. So ultimately, there's some consternation there with him. But I think you get to this point, you sort of go, okay, I've done what I'm going to do, and now I got to go out and beat. And again, what I gather from Greg Newsome, that is how he's wired. That doesn't mean that this sort of, again, I use the word consternation deliberately, isn't going to remain. But if he goes out and beats Martin Emerson for that outside corner job, and he's playing for a defensive coordinator, Jim Schwartz, who wants to play a ton of man coverage, which is where Greg Newsome is arguably at his best, I think Greg Newsome is like, that's why I think he's honest. I think he really likes the perspective of playing for Jim Schwartz's defense. But it's just sort of a little sort of just in case. That's his contingency. If all else goes, tits up, he can say, okay, now let's talk about this. And now let's see where we're at. And that, I think some of that is baked into the idea if he feels he's been treated unfairly. I don't think that will happen, but I think that's more of where we're at. But again, it would be like if you hired a divorce lawyer and you're like, I don't need this right now, but maybe in 3 years, you're probably not going to, it's not going to go over too well. So, I mean, like, I think that that's why when it initially came out, I think there was some truth to what Brad Steinwood was reporting, is some truth to what Drew Rosenhaus was putting out there. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, that yes, he wants to be here, that he's happy with what the Browns can offer him, but that could change.
Yeah, we'll see how it all plays out. There
is one other possibility.
Oh boy.
Because Drew Rosenhaus is so omnipresent, let's say that Greg Newsome has caught wind, most likely coming from Drew Rosenhaus. This is potentially another reason why a lot of people don't like Drew Rosenhaus, that Drew Rosenhaus has basically called up Greg or had players recruit Greg and say, you know what I'm hearing? I'm hearing your name out there a whole lot, that the Browns are talking to people about you and trading you and seeing what's up with that. And that may be part of this, that that's the other possibility is where you say, one, Greg Newsome, and I don't think he'd go in there. He goes, I know you've been talking to other people. I think it's more along the lines of clear the air. Where are we at? Where are we going? And I think, while he may not 100% trust what they say on that regard, that, they may say, oh yeah, we will take calls. We will listen, but we love you in what you're doing. We love what you can be for this defense. And we want you to be here. We want you to be the best player you can be here. And he may leave there feeling good about everything they said. And again, still in the back of his mind being okay. But so that's the other sort of angle of this, which is possible. It seems, again, like I said, it's possible. That's as far as I'll go with that. That's the last sort of theory of the case for what could possibly be with that.
Interesting, Pete.
It's gossip is fun until it's not fun, so
Right.
It's interesting, like the number of angles it can take to it. But for now, I think this goes away and we'll see what happens in training camp, but if you're the Browns, just like you did with David Njoku, I mean, the first thing they said, David Njoku goes, I'd like a trade. Before he could even get it out, they're like, no, we'll talk about this. We'll get this figured out, but no.
Yeah.
That is what the Browns are saying right now to Greg Newsome, and he knows it. No, we're not trading what we believe is a supremely talented young corner on a very low contract. We're not giving that away. And there are people spitballing like, hey, we could get a second round pick for him. If it's me, there's nobody in the second round I'd rather have right now than Greg Newsome. That's how good I feel about his talent. So no, I'm not. This does not interest me. Even if it's a late first, which is what they gave up for him. I don't like anyone in this class enough to be like, okay, I'm ready to move on. Like, I get it. Some people will be like, hey, the Browns are pretty good at finding corners. They can find another one, even in this class, which is very talented. No, I'm not interested. Like, you can't have too many good corners. And like I said, I'm openly advocating get another one in this draft because you can't have too many corners. But we've seen it. Denzel Ward usually misses a month a year. We saw guys just go down. Like, it wasn't for lengthy amounts of time, but you find yourself in a situation where AJ Green's on the field. It's nice to have AJ Green, but you don't want him out there every play. So no, it just doesn't make sense. So we'll see what happens, but I just don't think it's going to materialize. Now, the other thing that came out, which is funny to me, that we needed a report for this. What were the odds you thought Kareem Hunt was coming back to the Browns?
Very slim.
Yeah, I was at 0, but
yeah,
I could see it maybe on a minimum contract, like with some incentives. But based on what I watched last year, and the report came out, and it was either, I think it was Terry Pluto of all people, who was saying that the Browns think he lost a step. No, the TV thinks he lost a step. The in-stadium crowd thinks he lost. Everybody saw how slow he looked this past year. I've talked about this in the past. Kareem Hunt has no regard for his body, in how he runs. It's violent. It's his arms and legs are just flying around.
Yeah.
And then guys are full speed running into him. Whereas Nick Chubb is like the complete opposite, where he's very conscious of how he takes on contact. And like the stuff you love about Kareem Hunt when he was like, in 2020, where he's just violent and blowing through people, it catches up with him real quick. I saw a mediocre football player, and I'm at the end of that year, this is why I sort of completely understood why Dearness Johnson would have left, because if I'm him, I'm going, why am I not playing more? Or Jerome Ford, who got 8 carries last year. They kept going with Hunt, and he just, it was bad. And there appears to be no market for him right now. And I think some of that is the draft. The running back class is very good this year. So I think he's going to be a guy that doesn't get picked up till maybe June or July on a small contract. Maybe there's some incentives, maybe there's a small amount of guaranteed money, but it just did not make sense for the Browns. Like, I saw all I needed to see, and that was, 2 touchdowns or whatever in like the first 2 weeks. And there's reporters going, hey, talking about extension. Hey, it looks like time to extend Kareem Hunt. It's like, not so fast. And I feel bad for him because, like, even when he made the demand that he wanted an extension, that's what it felt like. He saw what was coming. he saw how short the shelf life is for him, and he wanted to try to get a little bit more money because, however you feel about him, he lost a ton of money because of the consequences of his own actions with the hotel room and a number of other things, the hotel security cam and a number of other things.
Right.
He never cashed in big. He got like $12 million from the Browns. And all of a sudden he's looking at it going, I might be out of the league real fast. I hope somebody will give me more money. And it's a brutal sport. And you're sitting there going, man, that feels bad. But at the same time, you're like, you did it to yourself in many ways. So tough spot for him, but it's just, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's interesting because as Browns fans, we were so hyped to have both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt on the same roster at the same time. There was more hype than there was actually anything benefiting from it, in my opinion. I mean, Kareem, I will give him credit, stepped up in a lot of ways during Nick Chubb's injury. He was mostly a third down running back. I think it was more fun to say we had two of the top running backs on the roster at the same time, but one could argue that Kareem Hunt was nowhere near being a top running back. Like he was always, like, going back in time in his days in Kansas City, like he was never that in a Cleveland Browns uniform.
Well, he was only that in a Chiefs uniform 1 year.
I know. But we all held hope that was like still in there with him, which is why I'm scared about Deshaun Watson. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Oh, Pete.
Kareem Hunt as a rookie was great. Now, I would point out, and if you go back and watch his tape, he had a seeing eye fullback. And Kareem Hunt can't see for shit. His vision is just bad. If it doesn't have a hole that tells him where he's going, he struggles. So with the Chiefs, they always had a fullback, and he just followed his fullback. And he's good one-on-one. He's really good at making defenders miss, and he's really good at just running through them. He was great. 2019, he was suspended half the year. Like, this is the thing, is like,
forgot about that, actually.
This is the thing with Kareem Hunt, is like, we romanticize what he was. 2020, he was very good. He was very good in 2020. And he was a big part. Nick Chubb missed a bunch of that year with the knee injury, and Kareem Hunt was good. Can't take it away from that. But then 2021, he misses half the year with an ankle injury. So like, his Browns career is really short when you actually get down to the games played. And like, that was 2 full seasons in 3 years. And then this past year, like, and it was quick. But he was good, but we always lied to ourselves. Not me, but people were willing to lie to themselves about this idea that the Browns had 2 top 5 backs. No, they had a Hall of Fame caliber running back in Nick Chubb, and they had a pretty good running back in Kareem Hunt. That is why I continue to say, if the Browns draft a pretty good running back, people will forget about Kareem Hunt really fast.
Yeah.
Or if Jerome Ford proves to be that pretty good running back, like, they will move on. Nick Chubb will be the guy you're sitting there going, no, he's that dude. And then the other guy's pretty good, and you'll be feeling good about that 1-2 punch. The other thing that came up this week, which is just endlessly fascinating, and if Greg Newsome didn't drop, of course, because it's Tuesday, that's how it works. Odell Beckham. I am amazed at what his agent was able to pull off. And my immediate thought when this whole thing came down, him agreeing to this $15 million guaranteed contract with the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson, hire this man. This is the man you want. If he can get Odell Beckham $15 million after 2 knee surgeries, he is your guy. Hire I don't even know the dude's name. He is a legend. He should go on the Agent Hall of Fame. But you were a proponent of bringing back Odell Beckham, and yet you saw the same thing I did. What was your initial reaction?
First, I thought it was a parody account tweeting out about this situation. The fact that it's with the Ravens is really just like rubbing salt into my wound. But honestly, good for him for getting that amount of money, because I did not think that he would be able to earn that high. I mean, and guaranteed contract too for the right? Almost all of it's guaranteed except $3 million.
They structured it. It's all void years. Like, it is just all guaranteed money, and it's like $2.1 million in void year, and then 4 more, like four void years. So, like, it incentivizes the Ravens to keep signing him, assuming he's, pans out, because then they don't have to eat all that money next year and to try to defer this. So, like, it's not only brilliant for him to get the money, but like it gives the Ravens a whole lot of reason to keep him around for the future. So it's like it's a weird setup. Not only that, everybody was scooped by his child's Instagram account. That is where this came out on.
I know. Oh, his little baby is so cute. No, so obviously the whole thing just is odd because the Ravens haven't locked up Lamar Jackson. The fact that Odell signed with the Ravens led me to believe that Lamar Jackson is going to be back with the Ravens. Maybe that's not the case. I mean, maybe Odell was like, I don't really care who's the quarterback. If you're going to pay me $18 million, like, great, sign me up. I don't care who's going to throw to me. Like, I mean, like, it could very well be that was his thinking, even though Odell seems to be very tapped into his emotions, and he always seems to be in his feelings, and spiritually there was a lot of connections leading him back to the Ravens.
18 million spiritual feelings.
Okay.
I look, Josina Anderson is a phenomenal reporter. She's great with players, but that was the hollowest tweet I've ever seen. Where it's like, no.
But listen, I could see Odell actually like saying that and feeling that way. Like
but he called the Jets first and said, if you don't match this, I'm going to the Ravens. So,
fair.
You know, when the way she put it, he felt the most love from the Ravens. Yeah, he felt $18 million worth of love.
That's a lot of love.
And then he followed his heart, which is apparently made of 18 karat gold.
Money talks. Money talks.
Again, good for him. Like, get your money. But
I am annoyed. I'm annoyed. Why does it have to be the Ravens? It's annoying. I want them to have no hope for the year.
Well, some people might argue this is an indication they have no hope.
Fine.
It's just weird for all the reasons you mentioned, because like allegedly Lamar Jackson was part of this.
Yeah, that is bizarre.
On the one hand, Lamar Jackson is allegedly recruiting Odell Beckham to the Ravens. Meanwhile, the Ravens are hoping Odell Beckham is recruiting Lamar Jackson back to the Ravens. And that all of this is supposed to grease the skids on getting a deal done, despite the fact that this is all about money that the Ravens to this point have been willing to pay him, which is again why they structured it in that weird way where you've got like 4 void years, because they have to spread this out because they can't afford to pay him all that money now. Right. And now they're in this weird contraption where, like, you know, if this doesn't work, they're suddenly in a bad way that they don't really have a good answer for. Like, if this, let's say Lamar Jackson still ends up on another team and Odell Beckham is not very good with Tyler Huntley, or, you know, they trade for somebody like Trey Lance or somebody, that's the guy I keep thinking is going to end up there. And then you're suddenly hit with like $12 million next year that you have to like eat all at once. Like, then the Ravens are really more incentivized to sort of just embrace the tank and sort of start over. And the other part of this is weird is that Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator,
I forgot,
was Odell Beckham's offensive coordinator in Cleveland, which there's a lot in 2019 people forget about, and how weird that year was and how like dysfunctional that situation was. Like, Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry had their wide receiver coach from LSU and just walked all over him. Yeah. And they had to get rid of him because it was like so bad that he had like couldn't keep coaching here anymore. Todd Monken at the time was like, these guys are all idiots. I don't know what Freddie Kitchens is doing. He's not letting me do my job. I can't wait to get the hell out of here. Odell Beckham plays that whole season with a groin issue. He does get 1,000 yards. He does go to the Pro Bowl, as does Landry. That was Landry's best year as a Brown. And it was just like this whole dysfunctional thing. Like, reportedly, both of them are telling opponents to come get us off this team. Like, and here we are, Todd Monken, Odell Beckham, and QB2 TBD.
Yeah.
All of this would suggest that Lamar Jackson's going to end up back in Baltimore by hook or by crook. You know, what does that really look like? But like, I don't know what's really changed other than the fact that Odell Beckham's there. Like, the whole thing has been that Steve Bisciotti is just like, the owner is just like, we're not doing this. We're not paying him $200 million guaranteed. So what's different? Or, you know, Lamar was cool with the idea of like $133 million for 3 years, I guess. Maybe they go back to that, but it really feels like the Ravens are trying to hope that like nobody's going to offer him anything, and that they can sign him to the $32 million, whatever figure it is that his franchise tag would be worth. I don't know how realistic that is, and they could obviously still match if somebody signs to an offer sheet. But like, this feels like the most temporary, fleeting W for the Ravens, because all it really does is, yes, Odell Beckham's on your team, and if he's healthy, he's a very, very good receiver. No, there's no argument for that. But all you've done is really ramped up the pressure, because if you do all this and then Lamar Jackson is an Indianapolis Colt or a San Francisco 49er or a New England Patriot, then you got the franchise receiver, allegedly, who knows at this point, that Lamar was waiting for, and Lamar's not even there to play with him. Like, it's just a very weird situation. All I can say is I'm so glad I'm not the Ravens. That has to be not fun to be that fan base. Like, you're sitting there worried Deshaun Watson's broken. Imagine you're a Ravens fan and you're sitting there going, I hope Lamar comes back.
Yeah, I think I saw someone tweet. I don't know who put this out there, but they called the Ravens pretty much like the 2019 Browns.
Well, and the other, people have like taken it. I don't even know if it's a shot, but they've sort of mentioned Sashi Brown in this whole thing, who's the president.
Oh, yes. My gosh, there's so many ties to all of this. I forgot.
But I'm not even sure how much of a football exec, like, it sounds like a lot of what he's doing is the business side, but I don't doubt he's involved in the football operations. But like, whether it's him or their GM Eric DeCosta or their head coach John Harbaugh, they all feel irrelevant compared to the owner. The owner is sort of driving this whole thing, which, thank God, the Browns are not in that business anymore. I mean, it was bad enough last year with everything that entailed with the Baker Mayfield mishap and him, the adult in the room. But like, that's really where the buck stops with this. It really feels like it's all on Bisciotti, which I love, because they've enjoyed such high esteem for so long that it's great that they're feeling all this pressure and they're enduring all this criticism. Like, I follow like Jason La Canfora and stuff, and hear some of the radio spots he does, and it just doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun. Now, I'm sure it's great ratings, but like, that's all it is there right now is Lamar Jackson every day. But so I'm curious, because like, on paper, you sort of think about it and you're going, Odell Beckham, Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman. They've got Isaiah Likely, the kid, rookie tight end they had last year, was pretty good. They've got some other ancillary pieces and receivers and stuff like that. And let's assume that they have Lamar Jackson back, and they've got, a couple running backs that are pretty good. Like, you squint hard enough and you're like, yeah, that could work if everybody stays healthy. Like, that's a pretty good offense. And now you look at sort of around the AFC North, and I'm curious, how do you feel like the Browns rank with where we are right now offensively? Like, and I'm going to simplify this a little bit. Who's in the best situation right now as a quarterback? Because obviously we are both in the, we don't know what Deshaun Watson's going to do. We have hope. You're worried he's broken. I'm hoping he's going to be good. But if you're a quarterback in the AFC North, which situation is the best one right now?
Is this a trick question?
No, because I think, like I said, if Bri is the quarterback, choosing between teams, you look at Odell Beckham, Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, you look at those running backs, you look at those weapons, you're like, okay, the offensive line, they've got some work to do. You look at the Bengals, you go, Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I honestly think the AFC, I mean, the Steelers would be the least appealing. Actually, that's a lie.
See, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, they have a pretty solid wide receiving core. I mean, they always do, and they always tend to have a pretty strong wide receiving core. They have good tight ends. I mean, their offensive line is so.
They're working on. They did make a big signing. They got Seumalo, the guard, which I think is a big pickup for them. And I don't think much of Najee Harris, but like, you're not hurting
exactly
guys to throw to. So
yeah, and then like the Bengals, same thing. I mean, their offensive line has got better at the end of last year. A ton of weapons in Cincinnati, and then you already called out the Ravens. I mean, oh boy, Pete.
And now you've got Amari Cooper, you've got Elijah Moore, you've got Donovan Peoples-Jones, you've got David Njoku, you've got Nick Chubb, and you have what you probably feel like is a pretty good offensive line. Like,
I mean, are the Browns still the worst from an offensive talent standpoint?
I think you can make the argument they're the best.
See, this is me. I'm going to stay.
Well, no, I'm just, I think you can make a great case for basically any of these four teams.
Yeah, I know. I don't like that though. I don't like that though, Pete, because I feel like when you look at it on paper and the Browns seem comparable to all of these teams, like lining them up roster to roster, position by position, I never feel like we come out on top. We can look good on paper, but we have yet to prove any of that.
Like I said,
I don't like this. I don't like this.
Well, one, I think I totally understand where you're coming from, but on just as a question, it's like, it's fun. Like, there are a lot of fun options.
It is fun, but some of these other teams, can things just blow up in their face for once? Like, something. I don't want to wish terrible things on people, but like, just once.
Right. You want the Browns to somehow end up in the,
best situation.
Well, you want them to play in the AL Central, essentially, for baseball.
Okay.
But like,
you stop that right now.
But that's the thing. Like, the Browns have never had that.
Yeah, there's no breaks. There's no breaks.
They always are tasked with a tough division. The Steelers and the Ravens have always been good, or at worst middle of the road. And then like the Bengals
draft Joe Burrow. Cool.
The Bengals were bad and bad and bad and bad, and then they were pretty good, and then they go back to being bad for a minute, and then they go Burrow, and now they're in the Super Bowl. They're right there. They're there with anybody. How much of that do you attribute to Joe Burrow being great? Like, he's the best quarterback of that group right now, in the AFC North, but they have really, really good receivers. Jamar Chase is really good. T. Higgins is really good. Tyler Boyd is really good. I think the Ravens are fourth, all things considered. Mark Andrews an All-Pro, and I think if you can get a healthy Odell Beckham, it's a lot better. I like Rashad Bateman quite a bit, but I don't love their offensive line, and I don't love their running backs as much as other teams. The Steelers are the sneaky one. Pat Freiermuth is really good, unfortunately. Yeah. George Pickens, too early to say, but he's made some spectacular catches. Deontay Johnson's very talented. They're not hurting for guys to throw. You've got so many options, and you come back and you're like, one, Amari Cooper was very, very good. Donovan Peoples-Jones had a good year. David Njoku had a good year. Elijah Moore has to prove it, but you like what he is. But so much of this, you end up falling back and going, I know they're going to block, and I know I've got Nick Chubb, which just changes. So I don't think the Browns are number one, even though I think if you were just to if you were to average them out, the Browns sort of end up being like close to the top just by virtue of the thing that's going for the Browns is they don't have a major hole where you're sitting there going, oof, that's not a good situation, where you can look at all these other teams and you can say, maybe Najee Harris isn't that dude, or you maybe the Steelers still need more on the offensive line, or the Ravens offensive line, or the Bengals. I mean, all of them are offensive line, or the Bengals right now, you could say tight end too, is another hole for them, and maybe running back, depending on what happens with Joe Mixon. And I think that's how you can talk. That's where I think in some ways, to your point, I think the Browns are somewhat of a trap, in the sense they are all around solid, but you can win a whole lot of games all around solid. So I think you could come up with basically any way you want to arrange them and you'd be okay. I do think the Ravens end up at the bottom though. And then the top three, good luck trying to sort that out. But from our standpoint as a team, as people who see the Browns do well, it doesn't make you feel great about how difficult the season's going to be. But that's sort of where we're at, and I think that's going to make this season a whole lot of fun. Whatever happens with the Ravens, and certainly we wish the worst for them, but they're not boring. They're not going to be boring the whole rest of this offseason. But if they come back, all of a sudden, every division game is going to be brutal and fun, and maybe in the best possible way for that way. And a lot of what you probably don't like about the Steelers is Kenny Pickett. That's sort of the other part of that. So It's just something I wanted to throw out there. I think the Odell Beckham wrinkle makes it more interesting to sort of, because without Odell Beckham, you would be like, okay, everybody's better than the Ravens. Now, all of a sudden, it's at least interesting. Now, he may walk into the facility, slip on something, walk out with 15 million on crutches. That's an interesting conversation, and one we will revisit at some point. But anyway, Bri will be out of town next week. So,
No, 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks or next week?
It's 2 weeks.
So you're not the week of the draft, but the week after the draft.
No, the week leading up, like the 24th. I'm gone the 24th.
Okay.
That's the week of the draft, right? The draft's that weekend.
Yes, I'm an idiot. But you will be.
I was like, wait, I'm not gone next week.
But anyway, to preview what we're going to try to do, since Bri won't be here, is we're going to do a Browns Digest roundtable NFL draft preview. So as long as nobody drops out, it'll be me, Abby, Matt Wilson, and Noah Weiskopf doing a thing. So that should be interesting. But anyway, Bri will be back next week. Or maybe I just sent her on vacation, which she could probably use.
I'll take a vacation.
Yeah. Do all the things, like, subscribe, tell a friend, all that stuff. But we'll be back next week. And I'm sure something will happen next Tuesday that will push everything.
Hey, off-season workout, right? Is happening on Monday.
Starts Monday. So we will have photos of guys doing stuff, and hopefully.
Can't wait.
That should be interesting. So yeah, we will be back.
Lots of body language breakdowns.
Yeah. Anyway, this was fun. We'll be back next week.